This is Saxophone Talk by Eastman, a show that features many of the prominent saxophonists in the musical scene, with an opportunity to hear their stories, experiences, and challenges that occurred throughout their musical careers. I'm Roger Greenberg, saxophone specialist for Eastman. On this show, we're here with the legendary jazz saxophone and woodwind artist, Bennie Maupin, also an Eastman artist. To give you a brief background, Bennie performed on the pioneering Miles Davis album Bitches Brew, as well as several other albums with Miles. He also performed on many albums with Herbie Hancock's Mwandishi Sextet and Headhunter's band, and with a long list of jazz greats, including Jack DeJohnette, Lee Morgan, Horace Silver, Woody Shaw, Lonnie Smith, and McCoy Tyner, to name just a few. As a leader, Bennie's albums go back to 1974 with his debut album, The Jewel in the Lotus. Others include Slow Traffic to the Right, Moonscapes, Driving While Black, Penumbra, and Early Reflections. Bennie continues to perform on a regular basis with his own group in both the U.S. and in Europe.
Actually, I'm a native of Detroit, and growing up in Detroit, there was a lot of music, a lot of live music, people who were coming in and out of Detroit that I got to hear. A lot of the great saxophonists would appear on local television, but I was mainly influenced by musicians who lived in my community. I heard them practicing and playing with their bands, and I really was interested in what they were doing. And so that period between middle school and high school is when I actually started playing clarinet. And once I actually got to high school, my band director, he gave me some tips on what I needed to do if I wanted to play in the A band. They had the A band and the B band. So he says, well, you have to take some private lessons, So he directed me to one of the schools in Detroit that was very well known for producing a lot of instrumentalists. It was called the Teal School of Music. And it was actually founded by a guy named Larry Teal, who was a great saxophonist and educator who taught a lot of musicians from University of Michigan, especially around the Detroit area at Wayne State University. So,
was he teaching there at the time?
He was teaching there, yeah. He was actively teaching. His son was also teaching. So first, actually, I studied with Larry Teal Jr. Yeah, yes, I was just getting started. So Larry Teal Jr. got me rolling, and that was the beginning of the private lessons, learning to articulate and learning things about the approach to playing with the classical saxophone technique, those things. But aside from that, there were a lot of other musicians who were playing improvised music, so I got to hear them. And Yusef Lateef was also one of Larry Teal's students. And so I got to hear Yusef Lateef when I was going to high school. Many of the greats came to Detroit that I heard: Sonny Stitt, James Moody. We got to hear Gene Ammons. And the list just kind of goes on. And as I got older, I got to hear John Coltrane. I met Coltrane like when I was 18.
In Detroit.
In Detroit. These are all in Detroit. My foundation is basically right there. So that was the really great beginning for me. I got to meet and spend time with Sonny Rollins, who came there. So those were the early years. And
did you know at that time that music was going to be your calling?
Well, I kind of felt it because I wasn't really interested in much of anything else. That was it. And there was just so much great stuff going on with the Detroit Symphony Orchestra, playing free concerts during the summer. They had a special group that just specialized in playing the marches of John Philip Sousa. So all of those experiences, just listening, going to places where I could get in, and you had to be 21 to get into the clubs. So since I wasn't 21, I could only go to certain places, like after hour places, where I could actually hear people like Barry Harris, a great pianist, composer. I got to also hear Donald Byrd, a trumpeter, Eric Dolphy. So it was a lot of exposure to a lot of live music, and I think that was the beginning, sort of, for me. You know, aside from my friends who were in high school, some of them were ahead of me. One of my buddies, his name was Sam Sanders, and Sam, he and I both took private lessons at Teal School of Music, but he really helped me a lot with improvisation and gave me a good, grasp of theory, because he studied with Barry Harris. And so, just being around, being open, that helped me to, get my feet wet, so to speak.
Looking back on your career as an artist musician, especially since many of your activities have been so important in the history of the great American art form of jazz music, tell us about some of the experiences that were most important to you.
Well, I think definitely meeting Coltrane and Sonny Rollins, they were very instrumental in shaping my thinking, because they were already making important recordings, and they came to Detroit, and they were very open with me, spent time talking to me, suggesting things. It was Coltrane who suggested that I move to New York. And so eventually I did. It was maybe a year after that conversation. But the moves that I made to play around Detroit really helped me to develop my sound and my attitude towards playing in public and things like that. And I got a job with a group known as the Four Tops, a vocal group. It was really popular in the 50s and 60s and 70s. That. I mean, they did really well. And so there was a summer vacation time, and conservatory was over and everything, and they were looking for a saxophone player. And I went and auditioned, and I got the job. And they took me actually to New York, which was a major thing for me. That was my first time going to New York. We played in New Jersey. We played upstate New York in the area known as the Borscht Belt. And that helped me to have the New York exposure. Once we got to New York, we had some time off, and I went to hear some music, and it just happened to be the great Thelonious Monk and his quartet. So that sort of made me curious about New York. And after sitting there all night listening to Monk and his group and looking around at the audience, a lot of great musicians that I recognized from Downbeat magazine and from album covers. And I just made up my mind that I moved to New York. So I finished with them after a few weeks, and I moved to New York and got into trying to make my way. It was very tough going there for a while, because it wasn't a lot of work for me. But I did manage to get a job working during the day, taking care of research animals in the Jewish Memorial Hospital in New York, and that enabled me to sustain myself, take private lessons, and to jam with with my peers, and again to connect again with Coltrane, and to connect with Sonny Rollins, and people like that, with Wayne Shorter.
And this was the highlight of jazz at the time.
At that time, yeah.
It was happening in New York.
It was happening a lot in New York, and so I was there, and I just was so inspired by everything that was going on. I got to hear some of the musicians who were a little older than me. Marion Brown was a great saxophonist, and Also, he was a great composer, Archie Shepp, because the new music was being performed around that time, which became known as the avant-garde or free jazz. Absolutely, I got to hear the great Ornette Coleman. So, those were like my real formative years in New York. And I spent a lot of time practicing and making it a point to ask a lot of questions of some of these musicians that I just mentioned to you. So the day job definitely was like the foundation for my finances, because then I could take private lessons. And I was directed by the great Eddie Daniels, who's a great clarinetist. A lot of people don't even realize he plays saxophone, but it was Eddie who I met through Sonny Rollins, who introduced me to a great teacher by the name of Joe Allard. And it was Joe Allard who gave me some tips to help me overcome some.
Of course, he was a great bass clarinet player as well.
Yeah, he helped me with the clarinet because I was having big problems there. You can't really teach yourself these things. You need someone to guide you. So it was Joe Allard who helped me with my embouchure, helped me with my my hands to get a good posture with the clarinet. Yeah, so those things were all the things that just sort of helped me to get through. I studied with a gentleman who wasn't well known for his woodwind playing. His name was Carmine Caruso. And Carmine taught a lot of brass players. But one of my friends had a problem with his embouchure and suggested that I go visit Carmine. And I did. And that really helped me a lot too. So, during that time, I jammed as much as I could. Eventually, I started to get some work. Things opened up.
Tell us about your impressions of some of the most important people in jazz history that you were associated with at that time. For example, Miles Davis.
Well, I didn't meet Miles for a while. Of course, I knew Miles. I knew his music, and I heard him when he came to Detroit because he came. And I got to meet him much later. The start of the recording activity for me, it happened with a musician by the name of Kenny Barron. He was a pianist. He and great trumpeter Jimmy Owens, they did a recording for Atlantic Record, and that started me in the recording realm. Around that same time, I got to meet Lee Morgan, and one of my very, very important jobs was this drummer, Roy Haynes. Roy had playing with Charlie Parker and so many other great musicians who were, very, very instrumental in the creation of the music. So I got to be with Roy. Got to play a lot with Jack DeJohnette, one of my very best friends. And those things led to actually doing more recording. It was actually Jack who told Miles about me.
You got the call to play on the monumental jazz album, Bitches Brew.
Bitches Brew.
And
yeah.
It won a Grammy Award, of course, and is now recognized as one of the most important albums in the history of jazz. What was it like getting the call to play on that album?
Well, I was shocked, to be honest with you. I was shocked that he wanted me to come. And of course, I was excited. I was nervous. I was everything you should be when you get that kind of a call. And then I was thinking that now I get to hopefully follow in a good way, in the footsteps of my heroes, of Sonny, of course, with Coltrane and, Wayne and all the great ones who have been with him. But he wanted me to play the bass clarinet. So Miles heard me playing bass clarinet when I was playing with McCoy Tyner. And for whatever reason, that was the beginning of a completely different part of my life musically. Yeah, because it gave me, first of all, what it it gave me musically. It gave me a voice, an individual voice. Of course, I had already heard Eric Dolphy, and that's the reason that I play the bass clarinet, is because I heard Eric playing it. That inspired me. But to be asked to play it on a recording as important as the one that we ended up doing, Bitches Brew, it was nerve-wracking. But Miles
in what way?
Well, because I hadn't recorded that much on it, but I'd been playing it a lot, and there was something about it that he wanted. So, he basically invited me to come, and that was the first one we did. And then after that, we did Big Fun. We did one called On the Corner. And we did a host of other things. So I spent a lot of time basically with Miles in the studio. We never played live, only one time. Yeah, just one time we played live. I wanted to play live, but by the time he called me to play live with him, I had just taken a job with Lee Morgan. So, it was one of those things. I tell people this story because I had to tell him no. And he wasn't so happy about it because he really wanted me to come and be in his band. But a week prior to him calling me, I had just gotten a call from Lee. We had already done one recording with Lee. It was called Caramba, which ended up being a very, very popular recording. It's still being played today. And so that was a change in the direction of my music, because with Miles, I had no idea of what was going to happen, but as it didn't happen, it was okay, because by then I was starting to compose some of my tunes, and fortunately for me, Lee Morgan, he recorded 5 of my pieces on an album we did here in California at a very famous jazz club called The Lighthouse. So it's live at the Lighthouse, and it's it's one of the very few recordings I did with Lee, but it's one that I'm very, very happy that we had an opportunity to do that. So I played with Lee for about 2.5 years, and prior to playing with him, I also played with Horace Silver and Freddie Hubbard, Andrew Hill, many other people who were around during that time.
Regarding young musicians today who are looking toward making jazz a career, what suggestions do you have for them to how to prepare, and what should they be working toward?
Well, a lot of the young musicians that I meet, because I'm around young musicians, they always ask me questions about what they should do. I say, take time and get a good foundation in the basics of music. Learn theory, learn harmony, definitely work on whatever the instruments that they play, work on those instruments, and make it a point to find your own approach to what you do. That's maybe the most difficult thing. I talk to them also about finding other ways to make a living. Today is very different than it was during my generation. So I had an opportunity to be in these bands with such great people to mentor me. You need a mentor. And I've already given you the names of the people who mentored me. So now at this point in my life, I'm mentoring the young guys. I'm talking to them, encouraging them to go to school and to look at studying something other than music, something that could possibly be life-sustaining, something that could subsidize their income so that they can do their thing. And I'm fortunate in that I'm on the faculty now at Cal Arts, so I'm meeting a lot of young musicians. I also get invited by Bob Menser, who's also an Eastman artist. He introduced me to the Eastman 52nd Street tenor. And so Bob invites me to come to USC to speak to his students when they come, especially the new ones who come, the freshmen, to talk to them just about the importance of being able to study with Bob, first of all, and being able to be here in LA at this time. I think that right during this particular period, I moved here in the early 70s. It was a different day. There was a lot of studio work. There was a lot of clubs going on. And it was very difficult to get into those situations because the guys who were doing all the work, they had their own friends and friendships and the connections that they made enabled them to do the movie scores and to do the things that they were doing. So when I came, there wasn't a lot going on in terms of younger guys getting going, but that's changing now. Yeah, that's changing now. I think because of the schools, because of Cal State Northridge, Bob is at USC, Larry Kuntz is a great guitarist. He's at Cal Arts. And so things are shifting in a very interesting way now. I feel that the guys who are developing, who are forming their own bands, they're finding their own approach to the music. And that's a really cool thing. But I always talk to them and ask them, I said, well, what are you going to do when school is over? How are you going to sustain yourself? How are you going to pay your student loan? How are you going to pay your phone bill and do the things that, in most cases, a lot of guys, their parents have been subsidizing their income and everything. So it's just a different day. Guys will find their way. I really believe they will.
More diversification.
Yeah. And most of them have good grasp of how to utilize the computer in creating music and doing editing. Some of the students that I'm meeting, they're also doing animation. The technology is playing a huge role in what younger guys are doing, and I'm inspired by that.
Well, Bennie, thank you for being with us today.
Oh, Roger, it's been a pleasure. I hope I answered some of your questions and gave you gave you some input. But I definitely want to tell you, I just came back from a brief tour in Europe, and it was the first tour that I actually utilized the 52nd Street tenor, and I had a ball. The instrument, it just held up really well, because I had to do trains and planes and taxis and the whole thing, but I found something in the 52nd Street that I've been looking for. And so I'm happy that
in sound,
in terms of the quality of the sound. The quality of the sound is it's unlike any other instrument that I played. And I've played the other ones, the more well-known saxophones. And when I first played the 52nd Street, I felt that I was onto something that I would be happy with. And I'm very happy with it. I'm very happy with it. And practicing is fun. Doing the things that I'm doing now with my students at Cal Arts, it's great because I get to play with them once a week, but there's a special quality that the 52nd Street has that I've been looking for. I've been searching for it, and I'm finding something. Every day it's a different thing. It's a different thing, but I'm especially happy with it. So, thank you for supporting me here at Eastman. This is really a great situation for me.
Thanks, Bennie.